All right, guys, here we go. 4.5 to 4.7 notes in topic 4. Frederick Jackson Turner here, a historian. He talks a little bit about what do we do after manifest destiny, that concept of sea to shining sea, America spanning from coast to coast. What do we do after that is accomplished? What's next for the country? Where do we turn our attention? And the answer is going to be outside the United States, with a concept here called imperialism. This is a policy in which countries that are stronger than others in terms of political nature and ability, military, their economic status, they're going to exert their control over other countries that are weaker than them or to other territories. Why are they going to do this? They can have resources and raw materials. They can get those from those other countries, which can then, you can use those for business to make things, produce things, plus things like gold, silver, iron, etc. They're valuable as they are. There's new markets to sell your goods. You're making some things. You sold it to everybody in America. Well, now let's start a new business elsewhere outside of the United States and offer new markets to sell things, make some money. We'll talk a little bit more about civilizing missions here with white man's burden in particular and military power and strategy as we go on. So I'm going to skip over those for the time being. Alfred Thayer Mahan is going to be a big role player here in imperialism. He's going to focus on the military aspect of it a little bit here. Former U.S. Navy officer and a military historian. Argues that because the water on Earth is such a big proportion of it, about 70% or so, we should have a large modern navy. He encourages this, and we should also get a bunch of military bases outside of the United States. This is going to be good strategy because it's going to allow us to, if we need to attack elsewhere, boom, we have forces, over in Europe, and we don't have to ship them to Europe or fly them to Europe. They're already over there. Or defensive purposes. It might be a bit of a deterrent. If somebody's thinking of attacking us, we can be like, hey, don't forget, we've got forces right near you in this other country at this military base. Throw in other things out there. Hawaii, we'll talk about that in a little bit. Hawaii, for instance, roughly midway. It's a little bit closer to California than is Japan, but it's almost midway between the United States and Asia. If you're sailing out to Hawaii, you can then refuel, resupply your ship and so forth, and all your military supplies and everything you need, as opposed to just you're not going to be able to do it, or you're going to have to take other avenues. So it's a good resource here to have a much expanded Navy and military supplies. And by 1900, we've got the third largest Navy in the world, so quite an accomplishment here. The Great White Fleet is what it's going to be called in particular. Moving on here to social Darwinism, that concept, survival of the fittest. If you can make it, awesome. You've got the skills to survive. If not, sorry about your luck. You're going to fail. We talked a little bit about this, how this probably can apply to countries. Whether it should or not, that's another matter, but it definitely can, in the sense that some countries are bigger, more powerful than others, and will take over those that are weaker, much as one stronger person might beat a weaker person. All right, White Man's Burden, Rudyard Kipling to your right there. You can see the arrow pointing at him, who also writes the Jungle Book. He writes this poem. It's called The White Man's Burden. In short, it says, because we are white, because we're civilized, because we're Christian, we have kind of a responsibility, a burden, a duty to educate, civilize these primitive people, these savages out there in the world. So that's kind of the idea that he's got going there. It's a responsibility of the white man to do that. Josiah Strong there to the right with a wonderful mustache and beard. He bumps in a little bit of social gospel and Christianity into it in particular, saying, hey, this imperialism thing, this white man's burden, that's cool and all. But we should also have an imperialism of righteousness. We should spread Christianity because it's the better religion, it's the proper religion, etc. This is going to lead to missionaries going throughout the world, spreading Christianity a little bit. This cartoon just simply shows Britain and America carrying various different peoples that are non-white up all sorts of things like barbarism, oppression. We're carrying them up this rocky mountain. At the very tippy top is civilization here. This is a little bit pro-white man's burden. We're doing a service for these people. This cartoon's a little bit against. The non-white people are doing most of the work here, carrying all these countries, America, Britain, France, Germany, etc., carrying them, and we're getting, the United States, for example, we're getting all the profit at the expense of the labor, hard work, sweat, blood, tears. Uncle here, class is in session. You can see the Native American in the background, the Chinese person right beside him in the doorway there. You got the quote-unquote naughty little children, Cuba, Puerto Rico, Hawaii, the Philippines, sitting in the front row looking like they're in trouble, they're mad, they're upset. Meanwhile, all the states are in the background, the quote-unquote good white children. Uncle Sam is teaching all of the good little kids in the back representing the white people in particular. They're doing what they should be. They're civilized, etc. Whereas these unruly, uncivilized, primitive children are up front trying to be educated by Uncle Sam. In the back, you've got a black person showing that he's a little bit civilized already. He is, cleaning windows. The Native American is semi-civilized, and that he's quietly reading over there, always not doing a very good job of it. So this is, you can make a point either way with this. Kind of up to you guys to argue it. You could argue it's probably positive, negative, depending how you want to take it. Literally cleaning people here with this advertisement. This is kind of pro white man's burden here. One place to start to help teaching the concept of the white man's burden and the way we do things is better is by literally cleaning people. You can see in the bottom right corner there, the guy being handed soap. He's sitting in the dirt on the ground, literally not very clean. So this is a way to do that, to start that. You're going to, lighten up the entire world, bring its civilization to it by literally just starting to clean people. Expansion here, just a couple examples. Commodore Matthew Perry goes to Japan trying to open up some trade. He kind of bullies his way in there a little bit, kind of the big stick idea with Teddy Roosevelt we talked about prior to that actually being a thing. This is about 50 plus years or so before Teddy Roosevelt was actually around and in power. Perry basically says, hey, Japan, you want to trade? Japan, who'd been isolationist for a very long time, says, nah, we're good here. So Perry's like, hey, you see all those warships I brought back there? Just kind of nodding over his shoulder there. He's like, hey, you want to trade? And Japan's like, oh, we can't match up to this. I see what you're saying. We should probably go ahead and let you trade with us. So trade opens up there. 1867 Secretary of State William Seward there, the guy pulling the wagon in the cartoon. He buys Alaska from Russia, and everyone's like, hey, this is a really stupid idea, Seward. This is, quote-unquote, Seward's Folly is going to be the nickname for this purchase. You spend a bunch of money on a big rocky area covered in snow and ice. Good call. Turns out it's actually not a bad call at all, because there ends up being gold. The Klondike Gold Rush is going to get a lot of people to move there, populate it, a lot of valuable resources, oil being another one of them. So really not that bad of a decision at all. Hawaii is going to get acquired here. 1820 missionaries, they show up, start converting natives, buy up some land. In 1875, an economic interest is really going to develop with the sugar market. The naval base is going to develop there in Pearl Harbor in 1887. So we've now got two major interests, economics and military strategy. The Queen Liliuokalani in 1893 is going to be overthrown. She's more or less going to step aside so her people don't get massacred. U.S. businessmen are going to be at the heart of this, so they get better, more favorable deals. 1894, Hawaii becomes a republic led by Sanford Dole. Dole fruits, you guys might be familiar with those. If you guys look at some of the labels throughout stores, comes from this time period. And in 1898, Hawaii is going to be annexed and become part of the U.S., so it's a great economics situation for us in terms of the sugar market and a financial market to sell things. So that's why we're going to want Hawaii. There's also the military strategy in particular. So a couple reasons why we imperialistically take over Hawaii. Is it justified? That's for you guys to decide. We said in class that, yeah, America is probably an imperialist country. They can be. Should they be, though? That's more of a thing that's up for debate. All right, Spanish-American War. There's a lot of money. There's sugar plantations. There's other plantations. There's businesses in Cuba. And this is a Spanish colony, Cuba is. So this is eventually going to cause a little controversy. But we have a lot of money tied into it, and when you have value invested in it, it's probably going to lead to a higher interest in wanting to fight for it if something were to happen. We also feel a little bit sympathetic towards Cuba because Cuba is trying to fight an oppressive government in Spain that's colonized them. We kind of see it as like, hey, we fought the same type of government that was treating us poorly in Great Britain, so we should feel sympathetic and we should consider helping the Cubans as they fight against Spain, who was just like Britain was to us. Meanwhile, yellow journalism is taking place. They're very sensational anti-Spanish news stories. They're going to try and stir up interest in going to war with Spain, especially after the Maine blows up. Havana Harbor, ships sent down to take out Americans that were in Cuba. Tensions are rising and they want to get Americans out of there. The Maine blows up, not 100% sure why. Some say it's a saboteur. Some say it was just, ammunition randomly exploding, whatever the cause may be. This is used with yellow journalism. Things like Remember the Maine and other slogans. You can see in the newspaper there to the right, the cartoons a little bit. Those all kind of stir up some major sentiment against Spain and lead us towards war. So what actually happens here, President McKinley asked Congress to go to war, and we do go to war. Cuba, Guam, and the Philippines all get troops in them. And on May 1st of 1898, about a month, no more than a month and a half, within a few weeks, there's American ships and soldiers entering the Philippines. Within a month and a half after April 11th, President McKinley's got troops in Cuba. Guam's going to have troops. And within about 4 to 5 months, this war is over, though. Spain is really no match. They've been fighting Cuba. That's worn them down. And they're just no match for us militarily. So it's nicknamed a splendid little war because, hey, we won. Winning is good. People like the concept of winning. Less than 400 Americans die in combat. That's actually a pretty low number. So that's always good. We won with minimal casualty. The 200,000 Americans that you see below there, they did die of disease, although that's not going to be seen as bad probably as dying in combat. Treaty of Paris 1898 does some things for us here. This is another reason why it's a splendid little war. Economic and territorial gains. New markets, Puerto Rico, Guam, the Philippines. Literally new locations, new territory. So these are new opportunities for us to trade. We've expanded a little bit here. Now, Puerto Rico, Guam, and the Philippines, we are going to get pretty much direct control of them. The Teller Amendment, however, prevents us from getting direct control of Cuba and taking it as a territory, but we are going to have some major influence for the next 60 years or so until Fidel Castro comes in. Meanwhile, back in the Philippines there's going to be some nastiness going on. For about 3 years, there's a war between Filipinos and the Americans, Philippine-American War. The Filipinos fought against the Spanish. They didn't want them. We helped them, and they're like, hey, thanks, and then we stay after Spain has been defeated. They dislike that. They want to be independent and leave us alone kind of concept. Guerrilla warfare led by Emilio Aguinaldo happens. 5,000 Americans dead, roughly. About 200,000 Filipinos dead. You can see here in this picture kind of depicting that a little bit. The guerrilla warfare concept, hit and run. The Filipinos know they don't stand much of a chance if they just line up, as was not uncommon at the day in previous years. Just line up and duke it out. They know they're not going to be able to do that, so they hit and run, ambush, and then run away. It allows them to attack without getting too many losses for themselves while still inflicting damage. Meanwhile, Taft, who's going to be a president in a few years, he is the governor of the Philippines. He's going to try and handle the situation with dollars, not bullets. His dollar diplomacy is going to come into play here. Coming back to that in just a little bit, though, McKinley, primary source quote, he's talking about the white man's burden here, basically. These people in the Philippines, they're basically just unable to rule themselves. They can't do it. They don't know how to do it, etc. So what's left? Why we have to take upon this responsibility to educate, civilize, etc. That's kind of the gist that he's getting here. Aguinaldo kind of touches on the fact in this quote about how it's ironic that in America, American citizens, they give the government the power to create laws for them. Without that power, the government can't do anything. Yet in the Philippines, he says it's ironic that that's how it is in America, but in the Philippines, for them, America says you do what we tell you or else, basically. So it's a little bit awkward in that situation. This is going to be a major reason they're fighting. Leave us alone. We want to be free. Don't try and push your situations upon us and your stuff that you do in America. Leave us alone. Let us do our thing. Other sources and quotes here. This is very much against the Filipinos. Kill them basically is what the gist is here. And this is kind of coming up with social Darwinism a little bit here. Look, we're better than you. Either get out of the way or be killed. Sucks to suck. Sorry about your luck here. This is what's going to come out at this time. There's going to be the other side of the coin. As opposed, you got the white man's burden and social gospel aspects. We need to help these people. We have responsibility. And then the other side, it's either get out of our way or be killed because we're better. As a result of all this imperialism, you're going to have some anti-imperialist groups forming, one of them notably the Anti-Imperialist League. William Jennings Bryan, Mark Twain, Carnegie, and Jane Addams. Those are all people that are a little bit more charitable with their money and donations and stuff. They're going to fight against imperialism. Hey, it's bad. It's wrong. It takes people's sovereignty. It takes their freedom, etc. Let them do their thing. We wouldn't like this if it was done to us, so why are we doing it to other people? Meanwhile, in China has got some issues going on. There's a Boxer Rebellion. Chinese nationalists trying to overthrow the government that's in place. Europe and the United States send powers in to put down this rebellion. When this happens, we're not necessarily going to leave, particularly us and Britain. There is John Hay, the Secretary of State at the time, turn to the 1900s. He's going to try and get American businesses into China. It's a new market, a new avenue. He creates this policy. It's an open door policy, basically meaning we're going to be in the market in China. Britain is, France, Germany, Japan, Russia. all these countries are going to get what's called sphere of influences there. You can see up there, their sphere of influences. Those are basically just areas they control, in particular within China. So China's kind of divided up here a little bit, which is represented by this cartoon here. All the countries are dividing up China. You can see the Chinese person in the background. He's like, hey, stop. No one's really listening to him, pay attention. So they're cutting it all up and, with total disregard to what's actually going on in China and what they want. Meanwhile, Japan's getting stronger and stronger. You can maybe attribute this a little bit to the United States coming over with Matthew Perry, Commodore Perry in the 1850s. Japan realizes they're behind the times, so they start modernizing a little bit. This is eventually going to lead to the Russo-Japanese War in 1904. They're debating who should have more influence, where, what influence in China. Japan's already beaten up on China, so in that regard, it's not an issue. But Japan is trying to exert their control and dominance over Russia, and Russia's not really having it. So as they go to war, eventually President Roosevelt is like, hey, enough. This is bad for business for everybody. He gets them to the negotiating table, and he negotiates a peace treaty to end the Russo-Japanese War. He gets himself a Nobel Peace Prize. So, hey, kudos for Teddy there a little bit. Puerto Rico here. As you guys can see, Cuba is being, and Teddy Roosevelt there. Let's give Cuba their something here, and we'll educate them a little bit. We'll show them how awesome America is and how we do things here. So let's give them a nice slice of prosperity, and we'll teach them. 1900, the Foraker Act is passed. There is a government officially established in Puerto Rico. Eventually, that's going to lead to citizenship for the Puerto Ricans, which will eventually lead to them mostly being independent, although they are still a commonwealth to this day, and they can still vote in elections. Cuba, 1903, is going to have to follow the Platt Amendment. This basically means that the United States can do what it needs to in order to keep Cuba safe, keep it in line. They are a protectorate. So all that really means is whatever we need to do to make sure Cuba keeps independent and kind of follows our rules and guidelines, we're going to be able to step in. A few of these things here. We have to have a military base there. Guantanamo Bay, you guys may have heard of that a little bit. If you guys are familiar with what happened 9/11, the interrogations down there. The war that happened, hey, Cuba, guess what? We just helped you guys out. You better pay us back. Any treaty cannot be signed without permission. This is basically going to be because if Cuba signs a treaty with, say, France, that could cause problems between us and Cuba. If the treaty were to say something like, if America does this, you have to fight them. Something along those lines. We also don't want them to get pulled into any foreign wars or anything like that, and by signing treaties, that could happen. If there are uprisings or conflicts of any sort, we also have the right to send in troops to settle it. That is the Platt Amendment 101. Platt Amendment here shows you've got President McKinley on the right as the server there. Uncle Sam is deciding what to order. What does he want to eat? Does he want to eat a Cuba steak, a Puerto Rico pig, the Philippine floating islands, the Sandwich Islands? He's trying to decide, what does he want? The Platt Amendment's going to give us the ability to step in here and do this stuff, particularly in Cuba. So what does Uncle Sam want? Well, that's kind of an imperialistic idea here that's being represented. This is for you guys to check out upon your own time. If you guys have questions, just ask me and we'll talk about it. Roosevelt and the big stick policy here. We talked about this a little bit. Speak softly and carry a big stick, he says. In particular, an example of this is the Panama Canal. Panama wants to become independent. We want a canal. It takes a long time to ship from, say, New York to San Francisco because you have to go all the way down south around South America. Massively long trip. If you were to just cut a canal through the Isthmus of Panama, which is one of the narrowest parts of Panama, then you are going to be able to cut off like 5,000 to 6,000 miles of your journey, which they're going to do that. The problem is, I believe it's Colombia. They own Panama. Panama wants to become independent and do business with us. So what happens? Panama starts fighting back. We line up our warships off the coast of Panama and Colombia and basically kind of give the impression, hey, Colombia, you better go ahead and let Panama become independent, or else. That threat of force kind of there, even though we don't actively do anything. What happens as a result of this? Panama does become independent, and we do create the Panama Canal. Go us, right? At the expense of, thousands of lives and all that sort of stuff, millions of dollars, you name it. Another thing that's going to come out of this, the Roosevelt corollary. We are a police power in a sense. We're going to patrol the Western Hemisphere, North and South America basically. We're going to be the police in that situation. If there's a problem, we'll step in and sort it out. This is kind of an extension of the Monroe Doctrine where it said, hey, Europe, stay out of the Western Hemisphere. This kind of re-strengthens that a little bit. A lot of Latin American countries are not going to be fans of this because they're going to see us as sticking our noses in where it doesn't belong. It's not our battle. It's not our fight, etc. Over at the right there, you can see Teddy Roosevelt. He's a constable. He's a police officer. He has got the big stick there. There's a little bit of chaos going on beneath him. Talking about Taft and dollar diplomacy. He's going to invest American money in Asia and Latin America, try and get things done with money instead of dollars, hence the dollars for bullets kind of concept. It's a nice idea. It's less violent. However, it's not always going to work. Some countries will take the money and run, do what they want with it. Some won't take it. Some will misspend it. So ultimately, it'll work in some cases, but a lot of the times it's going to have to be the big stick policy where force is going to have to be used. Wilson's got something here, President Wilson. Moral diplomacy here. We should spread democracy. This is going to be, a nice idea. Democracy is a relatively nice concept. Let's spread it. He wants to do it kind of like Taft. He doesn't really want to use violence or anything. However, that's also not going to be the case like it was with Taft. Moral diplomacy, spreading democracy is going to have to use force a little bit at times too. Mexican Revolution, 1910-1920. Mexico's got some problems going on, major problems. He wants to make sure that American businesses and investments in there are protected. Pancho Villa, a raider, he's raiding U.S. border towns. General John Pershing, who, if memory serves, he is going to end up becoming involved in the FBI. Chases Pancho Villa around northern Mexico in 1916. And eventually American troops are going to get removed. Wilson is a little bit preoccupied with the eventual war in Europe, World War I, so he kind of backs off on messing with the Mexican Revolution and lets that sort itself out. You can see there, Wilson depicted as teaching all these countries about democracy, morality, etc. And we want you for the U.S. Army because we're going to get into World War I next. If you guys have any questions, send me an email or ask me. Best of luck on the test.